Hey you guys, what's up? Welcome back to my channel. So I don't know if you have noticed based on kind of the general themes of the content that I've made lately, but I'm kind of on an eyeshadow palette kick. And so it's just kind of been all I've wanted to talk about is eyeshadow palettes. So I decided I'd do another palette video today, and I thought it'd be fun if I talked about the top 10 most unique eyeshadow palettes in my collection. I have a lot of eyeshadow palettes. I want to say at least 120. So these are ones that I do not have a duplicate of anywhere else in my collection. These color stories are something really unique and interesting, and that's why I wanted to share them with you today. So, if you're looking to add something to your collection that you've never seen before or that you definitely don't already have, this is the video for you. So, if that sounds good to you, let's go ahead and get right into it. So, I decided I'm gonna do a countdown format. I did actually put these in order. If I overthink it, I'm gonna start rethinking the order, so we're just gonna go with my initial gut feeling. Okay, number 10. I have, unfortunately, a palette that I do not believe you can get anymore, which is a tragedy, but you could probably find something these days with a more similar color story. But when it first came out, it was revolutionary, at least to me. I had never seen anything like this before. This is the Colored Rain Safari Rain palette. This is the color story. I think it is absolutely gorgeous. I think really the closest thing out now that I would compare this to is maybe the Natasha Denona Yucca palette. Yucca, I don't know, whatever, however you say it. Kind of similar in terms of having like the warmer tones with the greens and the golds. But this formula is just so good. The shimmers in this palette are like, whew. I never open this without swatching Lioness, ever. Like, hello? Just crazy. I don't know. There's something about the combination of those rusty tones and the golds with the really rich, like foresty, grungy greens that just made this so interesting to me. And when I decided to pick this up, it was because I truly did not have anything else like this in my collection. And honestly, I still don't. I don't think I have anything that makes looks that are quite the same as this. It's not necessarily all that unique anymore, I feel like, which is why I put it at number 10, but I still feel like it's really interesting, so I think it has to be in the list at least. Number 9, I have one that I don't pull for often enough, and I should. This is the Deuce or Douce, I don't know, something like that, palette by Juvia's Place. This color story, you cannot tell me that this is not totally unique. I have never seen another color story like this anywhere. That being said, the reason that I'm not ranking it higher is because I feel like if you just kind of cover up the mint green, it immediately becomes slightly less unique. Not completely not unique, because I still think it's unique even if you cover up the mint green, but the pop of mint green really makes it, I think, the most special. Regardless, I think this palette is really interesting. I think it's creative. I think I get challenged to make more creative looks when I play with this. It's really, really fun. You can make the vibrant berry tone looks. You can do something a little bit more neutral with some of these options here. And so I just think there's a lot of room to play. Like I said, taking away the mint green makes it slightly less interesting, which is why it's higher on the list, but I don't care. I still think this is possibly the most unique color story that ever came out of Juvia's Place, and I'm pretty sure you can still get it. If you can't, I'm really sorry, but yeah. Beautiful palette, super interesting color story. Numbers 8 and 7 are actually both from Sigma. So number 8 is the Untamed palette. I think this palette is super unique for a couple of reasons. Number one, you have the really beautiful jewel tones, which I feel like I don't see a lot of personally coming out in new releases. Maybe in like the indie world, there's a lot more jewel tones. But in terms of like mainstream makeup brands, I feel like you don't see colors like this a lot. But also what I think makes it really unique is the formatting of the palette, which I feel like makes it a lot more approachable to people who might not dip their toes into jewel tones that often. What I feel like they did here that was really smart is that they paired a lot of these shades together with like a companion shade. So like with the purple, you have a matte and a shimmer. With the mustard, you have a matte and a shimmer. With the olive green, you have a matte and a shimmer. You have two of these kind of rustier mattes, which I think was really smart making them both mattes because I feel like they're much more useful tones in the crease and kind of building that out to maybe pair with one of the other shimmer shades. And then you have this lighter kind of mauve-y pink with like this champagne-y sparkle that I think also makes it really approachable. Really smart again on their part to include kind of a bone shade and a black because it makes it so that you can combine any of these shades together with those and get a bunch of different varieties and depths of all of these jewel tones. So if you want to dip your toe into jewel tones and you want all the options you need all in one palette with incredible quality, of course, I think this one is an amazing place to start. And as soon as I saw it, I knew I really wanted to have it because it was something I just really had never seen before. So definitely makes my list of the most unique. So number 7, also from Sigma, but even more unique in my opinion, at least to my collection. This is the Enchanted palette. First of all, packaging, stunning. I love this color story. It just feels so whimsical and romantic, like fairy vibes, like Secret Garden fairy vibes, and I just absolutely love it. But really, I think that that's more this side of the palette. On this side of the palette, you can really get like deep, grungy looks. Like you have some really interesting shades to work with. I love this blackened forest green. It makes a beautiful liner, but you can also use it to really smoke out a look and make it extra grungy. I love the multi-dimensionality of these shimmers. I'm going to swatch some of them for you just so you can really kind of appreciate it. I'm going to swatch Electrum, Cosmos, and then my favorite, which is Metamorphosis. So there are those 3 shades swatched out. Electrum, Cosmos, and Metamorphosis. Metamorphosis is not getting done justice on camera. It has a beautiful blue sparkle over the top of this like soft rusty base. Absolutely gorgeous, but you can really see all the flips and glitter dimensionality in these two down here. They're super unique, super interesting, and again, Sigma's formula is absolutely phenomenal. So if you're feeling like springtime vibes, like the romantic fairy kind of look, this is so interesting, and I guarantee you do not have a color story like this in your collection. So for number 6, I cheated a little. Technically, this is 2 palettes, but they're the same brand and the same formula and the same line. And really, I wanted to talk about these not necessarily for the color stories because I don't use these as standalone palettes. These, I think, are some of the most unique palettes in my collection because of the formula. This formula is absolute insanity. Some of the richest, most shiny metallics I've ever used, and they're from the drugstore. These are from Flower Beauty. This is the Jungle Lights palette and the Desert Lights palette. I'm going to open them up so you don't get blinded. So that is Jungle Lights. It definitely has more of the interesting, colorful tones. But I, a neutral girly, of course, am obsessed with Desert Lights. So you can kind of see, even just by looking at them in the pan, that the formulation is going to be super thick and creamy and rich. So if you don't like that kind of thing on your eyelids, if you feel like it emphasizes texture or you don't like working with it, I would steer clear of these. But if you're like me and you just want the shiniest, most juicy metallics ever, these are the way to go. I'm just going to swatch one from each palette. It's such a hard choice, but I think I will go ahead and do the True Gold from Jungle Lights, which is called Amazon. And then from Desert Lights, I already did a gold, so let me do this pink one down here. It's called Red Rocks. These are so rich and creamy. Like, you can tell just by looking at the swatch how thick and creamy that formula is. And it goes onto the eyes literally like liquid metal, buttery smooth. Look at those. They're so shiny, so reflective. They're amazing. Seriously, one of the most unique shimmer formulas I have ever tried, and at a drugstore price point, certainly the most unique shimmers I've ever tried. Now, quick caveat, technically drugstore price point is being a little generous because these are, I want to say, $20 each, $19.99, something like that. I have seen them go on sale on Ulta, but I think I picked mine up for about $15, and I would 100% do it again. I'd spend $20 easily. They are so high-end feeling, so just ridiculously good quality. So if you are a shimmer enthusiast like myself, these are staples for your collection. All right, now let's get into the top 5. So number 5, this is truly something I had never seen done before when it came out. And yes, I picked it up because the color story was so unique and I didn't have anything like it, but mainly I picked it up because of who it's a collaboration with. This is the Club Nebula palette from Kaleidos in collaboration with Angelica Nyqvist. Unfortunately, this was limited edition, which is a real shame, but oh my goodness, is it an interesting, beautiful palette. So a couple of the reasons I decided this was an absolute must-have in my collection. Number 1, all of these gorgeous, rich mattes, this rich red, purple, this deep navy blue, this teal even up here, they make some of the most dimensional, colorful looks, but that kind of are grounded in this depth, and I think that they're so interesting. It also has a couple of really fun pops that I don't really use a lot, like this bright turquoise and this bright green, but they're so much fun to play around with, and it feels like you're doing something really creative when you use those. But really the thing that I think made me buy the palette were these ridiculously gorgeous multi-chromatic shimmer shades. I don't know that you can really get a feel for what these look like on camera, but I will try. I'm going to swatch out Firefly, which is my favorite shade. We'll do Astro, this blue one in the middle. Astro's a little bit more of a duochrome, but I can definitely see like the multi-shift in it, so take that with a grain of salt. And then let's do Celestial and see if I can really get that shift captured on camera because it has a really strong one in person. So let's see, the green one is Firefly. The green sparkle is pretty strong, but it has kind of a purpley silver shift. Like, can you see that a little bit? There's the yellow green, but then you can kind of get a hint of the purpley silver if I maybe tip it that way. It's kind of hard to appreciate, but yeah, from like where I'm looking at it right here, it's got like this purpley silver that shifts straight up like hot pink sparkles. It's super interesting. Cameras will never do multi-chromes justice. Astro is this blue one in the center. It has a very purpley shift to it when you flip, which I'm not sure, again, you'll fully be able to see, but maybe a little bit there. You can see a little bit more of the base. And then finally we have Celestial, which is this like kind of taupery color. It's a pretty translucent base that has bright pink sparkles when you look at it head on, but when you tilt, they go to this yellow gold. You can kind of see what I mean. It's this one down here. The sparkle almost looks purple on this camera, but it's that bright pinky purple, and then you can see it shift kind of to the gold. They are just so interesting. I really don't have anything else in my collection quite like this, and I'm really, really glad I got my hands on it. Again, apologies if you didn't, but it's definitely one of the most unique palettes that I own. Number 4, ColourPop. You guys know I love ColourPop. I'm a ColourPop fanatic. This, though, really surprised me coming from them. I feel like ColourPop can play it a little bit safe in terms of their color stories. They either do like the monochromatic look or it's all fairly, browns and taupes and things like that. So this actually really caught me by surprise in how interesting it is. It does lean fairly neutral, but it's just in such an interesting take on neutrals. This is the ColourPop Lust for Dusk palette, and the color story looks like this. I think it is such a unique take on a neutral palette. So for me, this screams like fall with like jewel tones, but muted. So like you've got this kind of blue-green shade down here, but it's got so much gray in it that it kind of tones it down. You've got this rich eggplant purple kind of color, like a deep purple jewel tone, but again, toned down. You've got this gorgeous kind of almost mustard shade that leans a little more brown, so it's kind of easier to use. This beautiful rich orange, this peachy color, this olive that is toned down. Everything is just a little bit more muted. So if you're not super comfortable using vibrant jewel tones, like something like the Untamed palette, this is kind of the more neutral sister of that. And I thought that was really unique and interesting and something I'd never really seen anybody else do before in a palette. Additionally, the shimmers in this are Some of the most beautiful, fun shades ColourPop's ever done. You have this shade up here, Shaken, that is so beautiful. This one over here is super reflective. You have one of their rich, thick shimmers as well that has these like delicious particles in it. And if you're into these like thick, creamy metallics like I am, that shade is the one. And then you have a couple of duochromes, this Night Lover shade, and then Miser over here. So you can really go so many different directions with this palette. I think it's so unique, so interesting, and I can honestly tell you I don't have a single other palette in my collection that could make the looks that this one makes. It is so interesting, and coming out of ColourPop to have something this interesting was a huge deal to me. So I think they knocked it out of the park with this one. This next one, am I a little biased? Maybe. I could be biased. This is one of my favorite palettes I've ever owned. So maybe I am biased, but I'm going to say it. I think the Jackie Aina ABH palette is crazy unique and interesting. And I am so sorry that they don't sell it anymore. So I'm going to try to be brief because I also talk about this palette all the time. I think that this color story is so interesting. I just do. There's something about the mix of these like super warm tone neutrals with these pinks and purples and even a pop of red over here. And then you've got this green brown duochrome that goes with everything else in the palette. Even though you'd think it wouldn't, it goes with everything in here. This green brown I use with the neutrals, I use with the pinks, I've used it with the purple. I throw this on with everything every time I use this palette, and it always looks amazing. This palette, to me, I qualify as one of the most unique in my collection for a few reasons. Number one is just the sheer variety in terms of colorful, neutral, mixed, like the variety of looks you can get out of this for a palette this little and kind of unassuming looking is amazing to me. The second thing is the fact that this palette was specifically designed to work really well on medium to deep skin tones, but it still works incredibly well on light skin tones as well. It just is so versatile in terms of the customer that can use it, and I really appreciate that about it too. I think that that's a unique quality that a lot of palettes do not have. A lot of palettes are very catered to one specific skin tone, and unfortunately it's usually lighter skin tones, so to have something that works so well on so many people is also incredibly unique. And finally, it's the fact that for a palette that can at first glance look a little bit disjointed, like again with like the greeny gold and then this actual green and then the red and the purple and the pink, it looks a little disjointed at first. It is so effortless to use. I mean, I could just grab colors out of this and throw them on my eyes and they will go together so incredibly well. The curation of this palette was done with such a careful eye and such an eye for color combinations. I could wax poetic about this palette, but I'm not going to. That is what I think makes this palette so unique. There are so many reasons, and I will literally love this palette forever and ever, amen. I'm so sorry it's not available anymore, but it is incredibly special. Top two. So these two palettes, it was very hard for me to pick which one would be number one and which one would be number two, but I knew immediately when I came up with the concept for this video that these would be the top two. Both of them have in common that the first time I saw them, I looked at them, I stared at them, and I went, I have never seen A, that color story before, and B, I have never owned anything like that. I mean, truly, I looked at these and I said, this is the first time I'm seeing anything like this. This is a brand new color story. And that's kind of hard to do in the beauty space these days because there's so much coming out and the market is so saturated. It's hard to come up with a brand new original concept. And I think both of these palettes did that. They're also two of my favorite formulas in my collection, so I am also a little bit biased in that way. So number two, had to give it to the Tiny Marvels palette by Sydney Grace in collaboration with Mel Thompson. This was such a well done palette. This color story is so interesting. I could look at this and keep coming up with looks for days. It just has so much going on. And honestly, when I first looked at it, I was a little bit intimidated. I was like, I don't really know what to do with this palette. I mean, when you take it in at first, it's like, okay, you've got this green and this pink and this gold and then this kind of lilac moment and this duochrome and then these neutral shades, and there's just so much going on to the eye. But they play together so beautifully, and it challenges my creativity, which I love. I love palettes that when I open them up and I first sit down and look at them, I go, And I kind of have to think about what I want to do to really make a cohesive look. That's how I've come up with some of my favorite looks. And this has been no exception to that rule. I've come up with some absolutely beautiful looks from this palette because I think that at first glance, the colors are very disjointed, but they work together so beautifully. Like I was saying about the Jackie Aina palette, but with this one even more so. At first glance, it's like, I have no idea what I would do with that. But then as you start to come up with more and more ideas, they just grow and grow and grow, and soon enough, you've got this lengthy list of looks that you want to try. I haven't even come close to trying all of the looks that I want to try with this palette, and the formulation is remarkable. Sydney Grace does beautiful eyeshadows. I'm going to swatch a couple because I have to. Firebutts, this insane, like, almost greenish gold shade is one of my favorites in the palette, and then Scarab is your classic, like, reddish brown to teal duochrome, but on steroids. Sydney Grace has some of the shiniest metallics in the game, so that is Firebutts. You can see how green it is from that angle, but then like insanely reflective gold. And then Scarab is also just insanely gorgeous. The flip on that is remarkable. Just absolutely remarkable. I think it's just beautifully done and truly not something I have ever seen done before or since. So Sydney Grace and Mel did a phenomenal job on this palette. And finally, we make it to number 1, the single most unique palette in my collection. To come up with number 1, I kind of thought about, number 1, the experience that I had when I first saw the palette. I was walking through a Sephora one day, and I stumbled across this. It was a new release, and I just stopped and stared at it, and I looked at it. And I did what I do with a lot of other palettes when I see one, and it just makes my heart flutter. I go, okay, could I make the looks that I could make with this with other palettes in my collection? And I stood there, and I went, you know what? No. There are some shades in this palette that I literally do not have anywhere else in my collection. It's in a formula that I love and trust. And the combination of colors in this palette has really made me think and made me try color in a way that I never had before. And it kind of made me try colors that I don't normally wear, but they were put together in such an interesting way that I just literally did not stop thinking about this palette until I had it in my possession. This is the Natasha Denona Retro Glam palette. I know there were very mixed opinions on this palette when it came out. Not everybody was feeling it like I was feeling it. And maybe you're not feeling it just looking at it here. But oh my goodness, if it isn't so unique. You can't deny it is wildly unique. This is not a typical palette. I truly, when I first looked at this, went, I've never seen this color story before. I've never seen it. And I haven't seen it since, frankly, other than in like the dupe palette that was made of it. I've never seen this color story anywhere else. And I feel like it has some of these shades that are just so different. Like the first one that comes to mind is this insanely beautiful, like seafoam mint green, rich metallic. I mean, I don't own anything like that anywhere else in my collection. There's also this deep, rich forest green that's in Natasha's cream to powder matte formula, which again, I think is super interesting and unique. It has this gorgeous topper color that of course is not that interesting. You can find it in other places, but it complements these other things so well. And the idea of putting these like mint greens with these kind of almost grungy, cool tone neutrals and then these pops of pink, I would have never even thought of combining those colors together. But I feel like when you look at them here, it's so beautiful. And every time I see people doing looks with it, I'm like, wow, that is so creative. And it just challenges me. I love this color story. It's not everybody's cup of tea. I get that. But it is undoubtedly incredibly unique. So that's it, you guys. Those are, in my opinion, the 10, technically 11, but 10 most unique palettes in my eyeshadow palette collection. Let me know what you guys think down below. What's the most unique palette in your collection? What is the most unique color story you've ever seen? I'm so curious. I always love seeing what the brands are coming out with. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like down below. And if you want to see more eyeshadow palette videos or swatch videos or ranking videos or whatever else kind of makeup content, I've probably made a video like it. Go ahead and hit subscribe down below. I would absolutely love to have you. And until the next one, bye you guys.